This is the Fantasy Ladder Podcast, episode 4. I'm your host, Steve, at Fantasy Ladder. This podcast is brought to you by the IDP Guys Network from idpguys.org. So, welcome once again, my fantasy football friends and family. Let's climb the ladder of fantasy football together. So, in this episode, I'm going to be going over my 2022 rookie ranks for running backs and wide receivers. In the previous episode, I went over my quarterbacks and tight ends. So be sure to check that out if you missed that one. And I'm just going to be touching on some of these players, not really doing a deep dive into their profiles. So what I would recommend you do is to go to idpguys.org, purchase the Rookie Magazine. This is a fantastic resource, awesome written content, really impressive stuff from the writers at IDP Guys. Take what you can get from this, go through the YouTube channel, look at all the mock draft videos we have, just so you can be as prepared as possible for your ever important upcoming rookie drafts. Okay, so let's start with the running backs. We'll pull those up. All right, so tier 1, we have New York Jets, Breece Hall. Definitely the most complete back in this class. A very good landing spot on an offense that is definitely ascending. This draft pick in the NFL draft was quite devastating for anyone who was a shareholder of Michael Carter. I don't think Carter is completely done for at this point, but it definitely hurts his long-term value with the most complete back in Breece Hall there. And he is my 101. I would not hesitate to do this. There would be very rare circumstances where I think quarterback Kenny Pickett would be the pick at 101. But unless you are even remotely set at quarterback, Breece Hall is the way to go. Tier 2, pretty tight tier for me. It's Seattle running back Kenneth Walker and Buffalo running back James Cook. I think James Cook is more of a late first round target. He will profile as a pass catching running back in the NFL, and being in that awesome Buffalo offense alongside of Josh Allen, I think is a really attractive landing spot. But Kenneth Walker does get a little bit of an edge here. He does land in Seattle, so it is not as good of an offense. So that is definitely a concern. But I think a realistic landing spot that you could expect Walker to be drafted in is between the 1.04 and the 1.07. I don't see him making it past the 107. I do see scenarios where he could be taken ahead of 1.04, but if that does happen and you're in that range, well, you're just going to be getting a much better wide receiver in that case. But what's most appealing about Walker is that he automatically becomes, if not the best, second best running back in Seattle. And the presumed starter before the NFL draft, Rashad Penny, is only on a 1-year deal at this point. So it may be a little bit of a slow rookie season if you do take the plunge on Walker pretty early in the first round. But I believe 2023 and beyond, it'll be his backfield. Tier 3, we have Houston running back Damian Pierce. I like him as a late first round selection. If you do need a running back, I think realistically he could be late first into the early second, but I would not hesitate to take him in the late first. And it really just kind of depends on how the draft goes, right? So because there's a lot of question marks at the quarterback position, if more quarterbacks are going in the first round, which is plausible, then Pierce may be dropped down to even the mid-second, and that would be even better value for him. But I'm pretty bullish on him. I do think that the Houston Texans offense is pretty sneaky good. Now, with Pierce and with a lot of these running backs that we're going to touch on, there's going to be just a lot of crowded houses. So a lot of these guys are just going to be buried on the depth chart. But just considering maybe their draft capital or just the players themselves or the teams they're on, still interesting guys that I would not be shy about being aggressive on, including Damian Pierce, the productive running back out of Florida. Then we go down to Tampa Bay, Rashad White. I would easily take him in the middle of the second round of any rookie draft. Rashad White was the fourth running back drafted in the NFL draft by Tampa Bay. So he will likely already be the presumed backup to Leonard Fournette, who hasn't exactly had a clean bill of health through his career, but he definitely would project to be the backup. Still have Keyshawn Vaughn there, still have Giovanni Bernard there, so that could potentially be a mess. But I think Rashad White is versatile enough and was productive enough in college that it would be, I think, silly for them to not lean on him. But as long as Tom Brady is the quarterback in Tampa Bay, that is still a very attractive offense to target players for, especially at the running back position. And the Los Angeles Chargers selected Isaiah Spiller in the fourth round. Spiller is a very talented player. His value did drop a bit in the pre-draft process after the season ended, as he was struggling with an injury and couldn't perform much at the NFL Combine and didn't do so well in his pro day. But Justin Herbert is the quarterback. He's coming into his prime here. Spiller is kind of positioned behind already Studley, Austin Eckler, but in the case that Fournette misses time, and you like Rashad White. In the case that Eckler may just miss some time, Spiller becomes a very interesting player. So Spiller and White, in the case that the starter may miss a few weeks, they may hold a flex appeal as early as their rookie season. So not a bad player to take in the mid to late second round, especially if you are running back needy. Tier 4, we have 4 players here. Atlanta Falcons, Tyler Algiere. I would take him in the late second to the early third. It is just an offense that is completely in transition at this point without Matt Ryan, the longtime franchise quarterback for them. They're likely to start the season with Marcus Mariota as the starter, but that they did draft Desmond Ridder. So a lot of interesting parts there. Atlanta still has Cordero Patterson, who plays in the wide receiver and the running back role, and Damian Williams as well, who's a little bit of an older vet, but still a very solid player. But I do like Tyler Algiere a lot. My comp for him coming in was James Conner. So I think it's a very interesting spot for him to land in, despite the Falcons likely to be a poor performing team, likely this season as well as next. So it might be a little bit of a long game there with him. I love him as a player. I think he could step in and be a difference maker, especially in the same case with like Spiller and White. If Patterson were to go down, if Damian Williams, says something like that, I think he becomes very interesting. Las Vegas Raiders selected Zamir White. Where did he go? In the fourth round as well, in the middle of the fourth round. And what's interesting about them is that they are another offense on the rise. A new head coach, Josh McDaniels, the longtime offensive coordinator for the Patriots. So that's really interesting. And Devontae Adams is now in Las Vegas as well. So a lot of really interesting movement on that team. And one of the recent developments that has me having Zamir White this high is the fact that the Raiders did not pick up Josh Jacobs' fifth-year option. So I think that's a pretty significant development. Zamir White very well could be the starter in 2023. But again, a very talented back from Georgia, not a bad type of player to try to have a lottery ticket on at this point. A lot of patience is going to be needed for Rashad White and down. So Zamir White, Tyler Algiere, Isaiah Spiller, all these guys, a little bit of patience, but definitely good prospects to try to capitalize on. Then Washington selected Brian Robinson out of Alabama, another really strong player. This was a bit of a surprise because they still have Antonio Gibson and J.D. McKissick and Jared Patterson, who was one of my favorite prospects coming into the season last year. Small school guy, actually performed quite well when he was given the opportunity. But with Brian Robinson coming in, he just becomes the de facto, at least backup, and could very well be a 1-2 punch there with Antonio Gibson and Brian Robinson. So that's a really interesting spot. Would absolutely smash his name in their early to mid third round of your rookie draft. Then San Francisco, they drafted yet again another running back, and with pretty strong draft capital, they drafted Ty Davis Price. Ty Davis Price in the third round. So because that is another offense that running backs can thrive in the mid to late third round. He's definitely an attractive type of a running back to grab there. Elijah Mitchell is still there. Very good player. I don't see any reason why he won't be the presumed starter for 2022. And the 49ers still have Trey Sermon and a bunch of other guys behind him, Jeff Wilson, and maybe Jeff Wilson, it becomes a cut candidate, so it's hard to say right now, but definitely the 49ers, good spot for a running back. So I think he's very interesting in that mid to late third round. Then tier 5, 6, 7, and 8, these are all essentially taxi squad players. Okay. So you really want to have lowered expectations now from this point on. I mean, even with Tyler Algiere, Zamir White, Brian Robinson, that tier as well. But even more so, the drop off is very steep, and that can be typical, but especially in this case. But there is a lot to like with these players here. So the Arizona Cardinals drafted Keontae Ingram. I like him as a late third, early fourth round target. They don't have a ton of players in that backfield. They do have James Conner, a very easy player to root for, a very productive player last year. No Chase Edmonds. And the only other running back there that I can think of right now is Eno Benjamin. I don't think the Eno Benjamin experience is really going to work out ever. So I think he becomes the de facto number 2 and a very attractive and fantasy friendly offense that he's a part of there now. So definitely a player I would take if I'm running back needy there in the late third, early fourth, but straight to the taxi squad. I'm not expecting him to be a year one even flex option, just deep on the bench or on the taxi squad. That's the expectation. Again, you want to have with this player all the way down here. Los Angeles Rams drafted Kyron Williams, the pass-catching specialist running back out of Notre Dame. Another interesting player whose value dipped a bunch after the combine and the pre-draft testing, but he lands in a fantastic offense. So the backfield is pretty crowded at this point. They obviously have Cam Akers and they have Darrell Henderson, who's also a pass-catching type of running back, and Sony Michel. Now, this might be that Sony Michel becomes a cut candidate, so he might just be like the number 3, just waiting for little hamstring injury, and then boom, he can be on the field. So in the early to mid fourth, a very nice lottery ticket there. Tennessee drafted Hassan Haskins. I like him as a mid fourth round pick. They are a run heavy team. The big dog Derrick Henry is still there. If he were to not be able to play, there is not much behind him. So Haskins could compete for that backup job. I'm pretty confident in that. So very productive player, very talented player in a run-heavy scheme. Really one of the better lottery picks again. And then we have Kansas City Chiefs selecting Isaiah Pacheco. I like him as a late fourth, early fifth round target. A very productive player at Rutgers. He's a little on the older side. He is 23 years old. A lot of these running backs are coming in at 20, 21, sometimes 22. So he's already 23. So that's a little bit up there. But again, you're just trying to capitalize on the awesome landing spot in Kansas City. And that's what you want to do. Just see what happens. The cost benefit is way better when you're targeting the landing spot rather than like a Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who just unfortunately hasn't panned out, but he was arguably, a top three, maybe first overall pick. He's like, wow, like the Chiefs got him in the first round, really awesome offense. So in this case, the opportunity cost is a little bit more attractive, but again, total flyer because the Chiefs still have Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who I think isn't necessarily done in the league, but he just has been a disappointment. And then they brought in Ronald Jones. So again, just the depth chart angle, but a good player, but just do not expect much unless a lot goes wrong in that backfield. Tier 6, we have New England Patriots, Pierre Strong, pass catching type of a running back. So there's a very interesting potential he could fulfill the James White role. The only problem is that the Patriots already have so many running backs on the roster: Damian Harris, Ramondre Stevenson, Pierre Strong, and then they took another running back in this draft, and we'll get to him, Kevin Harris, in a little bit. So it's just a bizarre move. They just love to have that crowded house of a running back situation. Just very bizarre to me, but really good player, very good offense. So again, we're talking lottery tickets. Can't go wrong there. Just hit him on the taxi and see what happens. Same with Tyler Beatty, out of who was drafted by Baltimore. Another player who will profile as a pass catching type. They do a lot of power running with J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. So he would be a unique presence perhaps in the passing game. But then you still have to worry about Lamar Jackson and his rushing ability. Again, one of my favorite prospects coming into this process lands on a fantastic offense. So I would absolutely be thrilled to have him in the 5th round along with Pierre Strong. Tier 7 and 8, these are guys who are borderline draftable players, definitely targets in the late 5th. We got Jerome Ford, who had a very productive senior season out of Cincinnati. He goes to the Cleveland Browns, but he will be buried behind Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Kevin Harris, as I mentioned, was drafted by the New England Patriots. Deep in the depth chart there. A good player, a productive player at South Carolina, but just has to have a lot of things fall his way in order for him to become fantasy relevant. The Jaguars selected Snoop Connor in this draft as well in the 5th round. They already have Travis Etienne. They still have James Robinson, who did unfortunately suffered the late season Achilles injury. So we hope he comes back soon. He's one of my favorite players. But Snoop Connor, interesting spot. He could fulfill like that Carlos Hyde type of a role. And I believe Carlos Hyde is no longer there. It's a new regime now. No more Urban Meyer. We have Doug Peterson there now as the head coach. So again, very late in your draft. A decent opportunity there. We'll see how the health of James Robinson comes around, but definitely a guy to keep an eye on there. Very late in your deep drafts. Tier 8, Minnesota, Ty Chandler. He was another really interesting player pre-draft, another older one, right? So he's coming in at 24 years old, but a very productive player at North Carolina. He would be a priority free agent. Just definitely got to have like on your watch list, especially in just the deepest of PPR leagues. Definitely a solid stash that you can just again throw in the taxi and just see what happens. Or just kind of keep an eye on them. If you get them, great. If you miss out on them, no big deal. But a very interesting player in a potentially good situation. Then Las Vegas Raiders as well. Sincere McCormick, again with the same logic as Zamir White. If Josh Jacobs doesn't come back for the 2023 season, and Kenyon Drake as the presumed backup is just again on the older side now, just like that running back carousel. It may just be Zamir White and Sincere McCormick. So a very interesting player as far as a deep prospect pre-draft. So he still is kind of in that same boat, but he would fall under what I would consider just a free agent watch list, just guy to keep your eye on. So that's the running backs. We will transition now into the wide receivers. So a really strong wide receiver class here, much deeper as far as quality compared to the running back class. So we'll just start at the top here with Atlanta taking Drake London as the first wide receiver off the board in the NFL draft. I would imagine him going as early as 102. I don't see him going any later than 105. So for me, he would be the top wide receiver in this class, as that offense is just in a state of transition. They will likely be a bad team, should be another pass heavy offense. And you love that for a team's projected wide receiver one in Drake London. Tennessee drafted Traelon Burks as they traded away A.J. Brown. So a phenomenal opportunity lies now with Traelon Burks. He is basically comparable to AJ Brown, who they just traded away. So we know what AJ Brown was in that offense, just an absolute superstar. So that's why I'm giving Treylon Burks the number 2 spot here. He was drafted in the first round, but I think his upside is immense. He's an awesome player. I would be very bullish to get him as the wide receiver 2 off the board. But maybe just a little bit of growing pains may be there. Ryan Tannehill is still the starter, still a solid player, and the Tennessee Titans did draft Malik Willis, so definitely a very interesting pairing between the two of those. Then my third wide receiver in this class would be Garrett Wilson. I have him also slated to potentially go 103 to 106, just like Treylon Burks. To be honest with these 3 wide receivers, I don't think it would be crazy if any one of these 3 was drafted as the first wide receiver in your rookie drafts. This is just the order that I would take them in, but it really wouldn't. I don't think it would be horrendous if any one of these 3 was taken first over the other. But Garrett Wilson, a tremendous piece added to that New York Jets offense that really struggled last season. I do think you add in Breece Hall, you add in Garrett Wilson, you still have Elijah Moore. All of these factors are just going to overall elevate that offense. I mean, it really comes down to Zach Wilson and his play, very up and down, mostly very bad as a rookie. But a player like Garrett Wilson, who I thought was the safest prospect in this class as far as the wide receivers go, a phenomenal fit in an offense that you definitely are going to want to be targeting. I would not hesitate to take him as the third wide receiver in this class. We'll go on to tier 2. The Detroit Lions drafted Jamison Williams at 12th overall after trading all the way up from 32. He could have arguably have been the top wide receiver in this class if he did not tear his ACL in the 2022 national championship game. Another offense that has nowhere to go but up. So Jamison Williams very well could be that alpha wide receiver once he is fully recovered and back on the field. I would take him as early as 1.06, and I do not think he will last beyond 1.09. So if you're picking in that range and you're targeting him, that would be the range that I think would be appropriate and realistic for him to either go as early as or as late as. And then it's a pretty close call here between the next 2 for me. I'm a really big fan of Chris Olave, who the Saints also drafted or traded up to select. So he was the third wide receiver off the board. And then Kansas City, as they are looking to replace Tyreek Hill, they drafted Sky Moore towards the end of the second round. So very good draft capital for both of these guys. Both of these players are really great. I do like the landing spot of Sky Moore much better. Obviously, catching passes from Patrick Mahomes is phenomenal. The Saints, will likely have Jameis Winston as a starter. So for fantasy purposes, we also like that a lot. I just give the slight edge to Sky Moore because of the Patrick Mahomes factor. But both of them I have projected to go in the same pick range between 107 and 110. Tier 3, I'll run through these names: Green Bay Packers, Christian Watson; Pittsburgh Steelers, George Pickens; and Washington, Jahan Dotson. Christian Watson, the Packers did trade up for at the very early second round, second pick. So they traded up. They did not get the wide receiver in the first round, but 2 more picks, it's the same difference. So Christian Watson, very interesting player, really athletic, really big frame for a wide receiver. Did play in suboptimal competition, playing at North Dakota State University, but I can kind of ignore that fact because he's going to be catching passes from Aaron Rodgers in an offense that is missing its alpha wide receiver. So for me, Watson is very intriguing here. Definitely a mid to late first round pick. The Pittsburgh Steelers got another wide receiver in the second round. The hit rate that they've had on these second round wide receivers is pretty incredible. Going back to Juju Smith-Schuster, Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, and now George Pickens, really talented wide receiver out of Georgia. I like him as an early second round pick, although it would not surprise me if he was taken at the back end of the first round in your rookie drafts. And for me, the Pittsburgh Steelers selecting George Pickens is basically what can come from that is Chase Claypool's days in Pittsburgh being a little bit numbered now. Still a good player. I just think if we're trying to read between the lines and as far as these draft picks go, I think that is the way to interpret what's going to happen in that offense. So Pickens will be paired up with Kenny Pickett, of course. So I do like that a lot. I would be very happy to get George Pickens in the early second round. Then Washington Commanders selected Jahan Dotson, one of my favorite players in this draft. I would not hesitate to take him in the early to mid second round. It may be a little rough going to start with new Commanders quarterback Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz, I still have a big space in my heart for Carson Wentz as an Eagles fan, but ever since the one season where he exited the playoffs with a concussion, he just did not seem to be the same player. A lot of the decision making has just been really poor, very up and down after the Eagles traded him to the Indianapolis Colts last year. So I am just a little bit skeptical of his upside in Washington, despite having pretty good weapons there in Terry McLaurin, now Jahan Dotson. So Dotson, I think you may have to exercise a little bit of patience with, despite him being a tremendous athlete, a really sure-handed wide receiver. I do like him a lot here in the early to mid-second round, but definitely may be a little bit patient. Now, in the last episode, I did talk about Sam Howell getting drafted by the Commanders, so that'll be interesting, right? If Wentz is pretty good, or if he starts to fall off, Howell could step in, and I think that could really elevate that whole offense. So Dotson, it's kind of a waiting game either way. He may be solid with Wentz, obviously, but Howell could definitely take that offense to another level. At least that's what I believe could be the case. Tier 4, we have the Cleveland Browns selecting David Bell. He was taken basically towards the end of the third round. I think it was a compensatory pick at this point. Really great route runner. He falls a little bit because he did not test well in the pre-draft testing processes, but really great route runner. I think he instantly becomes the wide receiver 2 in Cleveland behind only Amari Cooper. So with Deshaun Watson being the quarterback, most likely, that is very exciting. So I am absolutely going to be thrilled to land David Bell in the mid to late second round of your rookie drafts. Then we'll look at Houston wide receiver John Michie. he was taken in the second round as well, which is very encouraging because he did end his season with a torn ACL. So it's just a matter of time until he is recovered and back and back to be on the field. He'll be lining up alongside of Brandon Cooks again in an offense that I think is actually pretty sneaky good. So I'm very excited for him there. Would not hesitate to take him in the late second. And then the Indianapolis Colts, they selected another favorite of mine in this draft. That was Alec Pierce. My comp for him all along was Eric Decker, but just a faster version of him. So in this case, the draft capital keeps that comp alive, which I was really happy about. He demonstrated blazing speed at the combine with a frame of an X receiver or like a big slot. So I really love that fit in the Colts. Michael Pittman Jr. is like the X receiver there, so he will take most of the attention. But I think Matt Ryan should be able to get Pierce the ball enough that I think he could be second on the team in targets. Of course, it is an offense that runs through Jonathan Taylor, the stud running back, but really like Alec Pierce in the late second or early third round picks or the early third round of your rookie draft. Tier 5, we have New York Giants, Wando Robinson, another favorite of mine. He is a little bit more of a gadget player. Teams have to be, or the Giants have to be pretty creative to get him involved, which I believe their new head coach, Brian Daboll, will be able to do. I like Robinson in the early to mid third round. The Dallas Cowboys had to try to find a replacement for Amari Cooper, so they turned their sights on the Jalen Tolbert, the big and athletic wide receiver out of South Alabama. He is a pretty easy mid-third round target to take. Very good offense there in Dallas. A little bit of competition for targets. You still have CeeDee Lamb. You still have Michael Gallup. You have Dalton Schultz, a rising tight end. And then Jalen Tolbert. So a little bit of patience perhaps, but definitely a good fit. And that's what we want to target. Talented players and good offenses. So definitely a guy I like to get in the mid-third. Another guy I really like to get in the mid-third, or at least target in the mid-third, is Khalil Shakir, who was drafted by the Buffalo Bills. So that Buffalo Bills landing spot is phenomenal. They did have a need at wide receiver. And an interesting piece about Shakir is that JJ Zacharyson, his prospect model, his comp for Shakir was Cooper Kupp. So again, it might not be exactly Cooper Kupp, but you can just kind of use your imagination. A Cooper Kupp in a Josh Allen-led offense. Yes, please. I will take that all day long in the mid-third. Phenomenal landing spot for a really intriguing prospect. Tier 6, the New England Patriots drafted semi-surprising draft capital on Tyquan Thornton. Blazing speed, really good leaping ability, knows how to come down with the ball. It's just interesting because they just have a lot of wide receivers there, it seems. Jacoby Myers, Devontae Parker came over in free agency. They added Nelson Aguilar and Kendrick Bourne in free agency last year. They obviously have their franchise quarterback of the future and Mac Jones. So I don't know. I think Thornton just being like the easily the youngest wide receiver there and the fastest, probably the most athletic at this point. Very interesting spot. I would not hesitate to take him in the late third, especially the early fourth, just because of the depth of this class. If you've already taken a couple of wide receivers, you just might want to go a different direction in the late third, early fourth, get like one of the top tight ends like Jelani Woods or Greg Dulcich. But either way, Thornton can't go wrong with a player of his athletic profile and that speed. So I like that a lot. Then the Green Bay Packers did draft another wide receiver in this draft with Romeo Doubs. I like him in the early to mid fourth round, another big-bodied target for Aaron Rodgers with a receiving core that can really use some help. So you have Doubs, you have Watson, who we mentioned earlier, Alan Lazard, of course, and they still got Randall Cobb and Amari Rodgers coming back from last year. So definitely opportunity exists for Doubs. But again, you just have to manage your expectations. Picking this late in the draft. But again, this late in the draft, you want to target the wide receivers who were productive in college. That's Dubes, who are catching passes from the top passers in the league. Aaron Rodgers, that is also Romeo Dubes. So I like him a lot in that early to mid fourth round. Pittsburgh selected another wide receiver in this draft, Calvin Austin, another really fast player, another one of these ultra athletes out of Memphis, kind of adding to that tradition there. So Pittsburgh Steelers are really trying to do all they can for Kenny Pickett, but to keep it just to Calvin Austin here, a very unique athlete, could project to be like another gadget type of player, like Wan'Dale Robinson, like the Deebo Samuels of the world, and Cordero Pattersons of the world, Tavon Austins of the world. So very interesting player there. But another reason that I think Chase Claypool may be on the way out in Pittsburgh. Again, very happy to take a player of Austin's caliber in a good situation like Pittsburgh in the early to mid fourth. Tier 7, we have Chicago Bears selecting Vellus Jones. I like him as a late fourth round pick or an early fifth round pick. Decent draft capital here at the top of the third round. They drafted him 7th overall in the third round. What's interesting about him is that the Chicago Bears are still pretty wide receiver needy. They have Darnell Mooney and Cole Kmet, but really not a ton after them. So Vellus Jones could be as low as their wide receiver 3. Very athletic player. The main issue with him is his age. He is 24 years old, and there is jokes aplenty over that during the draft. But he could step in and compete for targets as early as year 1. So this late in your rookie draft, that's really attractive despite his slightly older age. Pretty nice. So especially in an offense that it has nowhere to go but up, and with that opportunity, pretty good at this point of a rookie draft. So definitely keep an eye on him in that late 4th, early 5th. And the Kansas City Chiefs did sign Justin Ross as an undrafted free agent. I knew he had health concerns, but he was one of my absolute favorite players coming into this draft. I really couldn't believe he wasn't drafted. But I guess the medical concerns were just too great for a lot of teams. Extremely productive in his first 2 seasons in Clemson before he missed the 2020 season, where he had to get a pretty significant surgery on his cervical spine. And then he was able to return to the field. So I found that to be very encouraging in the 2021 season. Performed pretty good with worse quarterback play. But he did leave last season with an ankle injury where he missed the last 3 games. So a couple injuries there. But for me, he is just the perfect type of taxi squad player. Nothing but upside, tremendously talented, definitely a injury risk, obviously, but lands in one of the best landing spots for a wide receiver in Kansas City. So I really like him there. Tennessee, Kyle Phillips, they drafted him late in the draft as they are now extremely wide receiver needy after trading away A.J. Brown and cutting Julio Jones. They did draft Traelon Burks in the first round, and then Kyle Phillips here in the towards the end of the 5th round. He will project to be like a slot receiver, so that's a pretty nice spot for him to be in. Again, still a run-first offense, but you could do much worse here in the mid-5th round, targeting a player like Kyle Phillips. I think he has pretty sneaky upside as a slot receiver in that Tennessee offense. Then tier 8, these are guys to target late in the 5th round or in the middle of the 5th round. San Francisco, Danny Gray, who they selected in the 3rd round as a compensatory pick. Very interesting, as they seem to have already a pretty crowded house as far as wide receivers go. But getting him in the 3rd round kind of raised an eyebrow. So keep an eye on him. Good offense. We do hope that Trey Lance is the quarterback. I think Jimmy Garoppolo's limitations are just too vast at this point. So again, if Trey Lance is named the starter, I think any pass catching weapon in that offense is worth taking a look at. Then Miami, they drafted a really big bodied wide receiver here in Eric Ezukanma. He's going to be buried on the depth chart on an ascending offense, so we do like that. But they do have Tyreek Hill. They do have Jalen Waddle. They still have Mike Gesicki, and they brought in Cedric Wilson. So it's really going to be tough for him to get on the field, but he's a big body receiver. So you like that. Obviously, he's pretty unique from what their receiving core has there. But late fifth round, not a bad place to look. Then the last player I'm going to mention is Seattle Seahawk, Bo Melton, a very versatile player. He's going to be used on special teams and potentially as a slot receiver. Obviously, the Seattle offense is going to be pretty poor, but as they transition, if he is a versatile enough player, he could definitely find himself on the field again. Late fifth round pick, priority free agent in just the deepest of leagues. So really just maybe a guy to kind of have on your watch list. But yeah, so there's your running backs and there's your wide receivers. Again, check out episode 3 to take a look at what I think about the quarterbacks and the tight ends of this class. And then if you keep checking in on the show, we're gonna have a lot of awesome stuff coming up for you. We're gonna have an interview with some of your favorite people in the fantasy football community. And again, I urge you to check out the IDP Guys Rookie Magazine. It's a fantastic resource. Again, take that, go through our YouTube channel, look at all of our mock drafts and our breakdowns. Really fantastic content on the YouTube channel and on the website. And use this podcast as well as a resource. Put it all together. I believe you will be more than prepared for your ever important rookie drafts. So I'm Steve at Fantasy Ladder. Please follow me on Twitter. I'm always accessible to answer any questions or concerns you have regarding your fantasy teams. And subscribe to the YouTube channel. That way you never miss new content from IDP Guys. And it is IDP oriented, but at the site, we've got offense too. So I'm just here to remind you of that. So that's going to do it for episode 4. Keep climbing.